Here.
I've got 3 o'clock, so I'm going to call the regular scheduled council meeting for August the 12th to order. And with that, I would like to remind councillors and the public to speak up. We're being recorded for the current magazine. And having said that, speak to the back end of the street somewhere because they cannot hear you at home. Thank you. Good. Having said that, I'm looking for a motion to adopt the agenda. Scarcella and Nixon, thank you very much. Any additions, deletions? Seeing none, all in favor? Passes. Adoption of the minutes of the regular council meeting of July 22nd. Councilor Bender, Councilor Wheelock. Discussion? All in favor? Passes, thank you. Announcements from the mayor. First, this is the reunion weekend. Every 5 years, there's a group of people in the community, including city staff, that organize a reunion for former Revelstokians to come back and visit friends and family. With that, it's going to be a great weekend for Revelstoke. I look forward to it. The last time we had a reunion like this, I spent most of it shuffling Lord Revelstoke around the community, which was a lot of fun considering he was about 88 years old at the time, but I got some good stories. I'm looking forward to the reunion, and I'm sure we all are. Having said that, the highlight of Saturday, of course, will be the Timber Days with the events down at Centennial Park. And the highlight there, of course, will be the cross-cut race between the MLA and the mayor. Having said that, for those of you who haven't been downtown in the evenings for the last couple of weeks, I encourage you all to take time to do that. There is a tremendous amount of excitement and buzz downtown as it's full of tourists. And it's a fun place to be in the evenings, particularly with the free music, but just to have that many people downtown and enjoying our community. The other one is that there's an exhibit at 4 o'clock on Friday the 15th, that's this Friday, at the museum, and it's a World War I commemorative exhibit. So it should be quite good. It has a number of speeches, including a speech by Ken English, who has a draft book on the First World War, and the people from Revelstoke who did volunteer and served in the First World War. With that, we do have a delegation today, and it's my pleasure to introduce Rob Elliott, who is the General Manager of Revelstoke Mountain Resorts in the community. We normally have somebody from the resort come to visit us and once a year or so. So, Rob, my pleasure.
Hello, hello. I'm going to speak up. I tend to mumble, so I've been criticized my whole life about mumbling. So my mother, she's my conscience right now. She's lingering behind me here to try to make sure I speak up. Tim invited me to this session last year, and unfortunately I didn't manage to show up. There were a number of contentious issues at hand, and there were, I managed to two-step around getting up in front of a crowd, so I didn't mind doing that. So last year I missed it, but this one of the key things that has been missing from the resort is an open communication. I think that's an element that's been missing over the last couple of years, and even beyond that. I think from my term, I think we need to improve that. So that's from my perspective. I want to work on that in the future and open the doors a little bit more than they have been. So the purpose of today is just to give you a bit of a recap of what happened at the resort this year and some of the improvements we made. It's also to touch on some of the things we hope to do for next season. There's a number of things that are in the works, so I'll just give you a bit of an inside scoop on that sort of stuff. And finally, just touching on, I wanted to introduce a possible way forward, some of the things that I see as ways that we can move together forward. The resort will succeed on, just live on its own ways, the way, given what it has, it's got room for success. But I think there's so much more, the possibilities are so much bigger. And I think if we get the community involved and everyone pulling together, I think that the way is much bigger than what we have. So anyway, touching on the last season, it was a big year. We had a And skier visits that top the record to this point. We've just been slowly filling with the 200,000 mark. We're getting closer to it, and that defining level is sort of separates the small resorts from the medium, and then the bigger ones are off the charts. But we had aspirations at the beginning when this thing set out for a quick access to that, moving into the medium and higher level resorts, and but we're still making progress. We're still moving ahead, and so we had a target last year. But the biggest thing that came out of last year was the destination skier tickets. They're components. There's a season pass component, which is relatively flat and will likely stay flat because as the city stays in this sort of position it's in, it's likely it's not going to see much growth there. But the day tickets are where we're going to win. And that means people are coming to Roseau. People are starting to hear about us. The media, the attraction is growing. So worldwide, that's happening. We get countless of media inquiries from Europe, from South America. We've got the U.S. is just all over us, and we're the belle of the ball in a resort game. We're young and raw, but we're still an attraction, and people are still going to find us. So the day tickets were a big win for us. The season passes, they stayed pretty well on par with what we've had in the last number of years. We've had 3,000 season passes, so that's a third or better of the population of Revelstoke that are coming to Revelstoke, coming skiing at the ski hill, and that's an impressive part. I mean, no other ski field has that big a representation from that. If you go to Whistler, a third of Whistler is not from Vancouver. I mean, they're not skiing in Whistler. I mean, they go for a day visit, but Revelstoke is buying into the resort. So that's important. That's a big part. And we want to keep that at least better and try to work up and get it up to maybe 40% for budget. We're trying to draw Salmon Arm into it. We're trying to draw Sickleys and get them part of it. And the cusp, all those areas that are immediately around us, if we can start drawing those people into Revelstoke, drawing them away from Silver Star or that sort of thing, that's a base level for us. That'll allow us to plan some other things and bigger and better for the season. But what really counts is the day tickets. So how do we get them in? And we've been talking about all kinds of different things, but we just keep making improvements on the resort and keep getting the media message out there, and those things keep those people still keep coming. So part of that is improving the amenities at the resort. We've added some retail space. Last year we improved it, we tweaked it a bit. We're tweaking it even further this season, but the change we made last year allowed us to grow. We've had significant growth in the snow school. We've had bookings on our rental skis and all those type of things that go along with running a destination resort. Showed dramatic improvement. So those were positive. Food and beverage, there was a change on that front. Part of the Northlands organization, Denny's is one segment, and they ran the food and beverage component in the last number of years. Last season, Moxie's, which is another component of Northlands, they took over that realm, and they're a bit more entertainment, a bit more energetic, a bit more appropriate for the ski, the entertainment industry, which we're in, with the ski industry. They fit better. So they came in this year, and the results were positive on that side too. They facilitated the growth in the numbers. They livened up a bit. They provided music in the plaza. They've gotten just the energy level is a bit more manageable and a bit more appropriate for a ski resort. So that's what they brought. Some functioning things. We worked on some bathrooms and amenities that are necessary to handle the crowds. Those were just inevitable with growth. We had to put those things in to make it work up there. So bathrooms on the riverside. We've just added some locker room space and just simple things that made it work a little bit better. Big one for us is what we did last year on the summer. We opened the summer gondola, and that was a tiptoe into it. We didn't know what it might bring. We know we're trying to get to a four-season resort status, and the gondola was a tiptoe into it. And what that did is it just showed that we can now start drawing traffic from bus tours. We put the word out to various tour agencies, wholesalers worldwide, and now they're starting to connect, stop over in Revelstoke en route from Vancouver or Seattle to Banff. Banff's the draw, where the stopover, starting to pull in. And indicating for next year what we might do. I mean, that has been significantly, that has grown significantly this year. You know, on the food side, we've gone to 300% growth on the food from the bus traffic. And the hotel is 100% growth over last season. So, dramatic. And it just indicates that there is more potential. And if we start adding more activities and more longer hours on the gauntlet and trails down from there, and more different options, I guess, for those guests, then all of a sudden we've got a story, and people will, you know. So those are all really positive. And this year we're seeing significantly more growth than we had anticipated. So next year, as we add more trails and more biking and more attraction to the lake and easier access to Williamson's Lake or whatever, or create more advertising for the museum. Who knows what it might be. So anyway, that was a significant step for last season. On the hill, we just did a bunch of work for the skiing. The skiing is a big part for me, and some of the grading that we did is improve the experience dramatically. We've done a bunch of stuff on the south side. We made a connector trail that drew people back quickly, and it also spread people out from the bottleneck that we had at the top of the slope chair, or the bottom of the slope chair, sorry. So we've got south side utilized, and we're also starting to think this year we're going to do some blading on the north side, so we'll draw people that way. So the crowds that we get are managed, and that's what we're trying to do without a major investment in a lift system at this stage. So we're trying to find a way to utilize the terrain that we have, make the skiing better, and improve the experience. Okay. So I guess on the construction front, there's always this contention with the city, and we're making inroads. It's an ongoing battle. You guys know that, but they're trying, and I think the improvements are the visual one. It's obvious. We're trying to clean up around the playhouse, the south side of the resort. That's been a bit of an eyesore for a while. We've managed quite a bit of that refuse and construction leftovers. So that's being cleaned up. We're trying now to develop a plan for that south side, what that might entail. It's up in the air at the moment, but we're working on it. So the cleaning has been done up to this stage. There's more yet to be done, but we're still working. And we're trying to formulate a plan for the upcoming season and beyond. Specifically on this year's projects, we tweaked the hours on the gauntlet. We've added more time. We've opened it up for a longer brunch on Sundays and the weekend, and Saturdays. On the weekends, we've extended the hours, and that was positive. We're trying to draw more people from the community into this. So they can get up and have a lazy Saturday morning or Sunday morning, and just stroll up there and have breakfast and brunch. And then we've also developed a trail down from the day lodge. So it's a 3-kilometer meandering trail down from the day lodge. So it just adds a little distraction, a little more reason to wander up that way. So spend some time there anyway. We're currently, the Williamson Lake thing. I guess the infrastructure, we're also the infrastructure. The hotel affiliated with being a resort, the status in the city, there's some money that comes in for the, I think you guys know that. But there is some money that's allocated for the Williamson's Lake, and then we had some discussion about a riparian zone. But where that might go, I think there's a willingness for the resort to consider some alternative uses for that golf course land, and they're exploring that. I talked to the fire crews, and they're interested in a fitness training loop, trail system throughout there. There's a number of different things we're trying to consider at this point, and I think there's money and to make Williamson's Lake, that whole zone there, a really unique place, and the opportunities there. So again, we'll have to formulate a plan for it, what the resort would like to do, and then try to what the city hopes what they foresee for it, and go from there. We on the retail and the plaza, we've finally we've got a new day spa that's taking up space there in February, so that's been added. that allows more of a complete resort experience. If you're going to go to a spot, you probably want to be pampered a little bit, and so that's taking up some retail space in the plaza. We've licensed the patio deck, which allowed some of the wing night, which is a big hit on Monday nights. It allows that space to be utilized, and so it creates more of a buzz there. What else are we doing? We're the retail space. There was one spot that was available. We've taken that over and expanded the retail facility. So now we've got an actual shop that might function properly for the number of guests that we get. And so instead of bottling into one little tight little space, they've doubled the size. So there's no commercial space in the plaza left, but there's vendors out there like maybe that are interested in adding some other commercial space. Maybe there's a couple of things. We need a convenience store. We need some to buy the day-to-day type of things that we would like to offer our hotel guests, and that might fit well with the seniors and traffic and light traffic. Wherever else we're up there, we would like to keep it open a bit longer. So that's being considered as well. We're still plugging on the grading, as I mentioned. We're working on the north side at the moment. Well, there's a bit of a fire concern right now. The heat is a bit of a concern, but maybe this weekend with the rain, or if we get that, that'll allow us to get back in action. But we're trying to do some work on the north side to expand the skiing over there. There's a couple of runs that work, but then there's so much extra terrain that could be improved upon. So we're plugging at that. We're also trying to lay out a possible terrain park on the north side below the river chair. So again, there's a couple of things that ties into the season pass. If we can encourage people from other, that could currently go to Silver Star or other resorts, if we can draw them this way with a terrain park, again, it's a part of the story about Revelstoke. So we haven't confirmed that yet, but we're working. We did some work in the parking to handle the crowds, to handle the traffic that we had. The parking lot's been expanded. Basically, it was just we had a big pile of debris up there in the last 4 or 5 years. And at the start of as you just approach the resort, there's now just a big rock there that might be. I'm trying to work on placing a big identifying sign that says "You Rock." So that's part of our plan. But we've expanded the parking lot so it allows better management of the car traffic that we do get. It also keeps him off the road, which is a bit of a fire marshal issue. He's in front of us on a number of occasions. Expansion, summer operations, new activities. So new activities, that's the big one. There are a number of decommissioned bike trails that were up at the resort over the last few years. We're in Milk-Head, there's a run called the Big Easy and the Crowbar, and then there's not even on the Southern Comfort. Is that the one, Alex? You might know.
Yeah.
It's anyway, we've got all these trails that have sort of been neglected. We cleaned them up so they're rideable, and a bit of the work is to make it to the current biking standard. So, but we're adding those to the lower level, and we're playing with the idea of shuttling people up into the Alpine, right at the top of the dome. So maybe next season we'll get some bike trails up into the Cat Terrain and out beyond towards Ghost Peak, and it's a real playground up there, and it'll be the same as Frisbee Ridge or Keystone Basin, that type of riding, and it's those two trails are a big attraction. This would be equal to that, as well. I mean, it's Rogers Pass, just on the other side of, Kokanee Ridge. You look towards, you're looking at Rogers Pass, same type of terrain, so it's a beautiful place, and it's if we can access it, then that's what we're going to try to get to anyway. Events. We ran a 60-kilometer run here a month or so ago. That was just an introduction to it. We started over coffee. I knew a lady who had this company called 5 Peaks. We talked before, maybe we should run around Revelstoke. And I said, well, yeah. And then she talked about this ultra distance running, and we said, well, we got the venue. Why don't we just try to work towards that? So anyway, we ran this thing. A lot of lessons were learned, but the overall consensus was it was a raving success. The runners they just wanted more. They wanted more. It's a 60-kilometer run wasn't enough. I mean, you know, they want to, you know, we're aiming for, they want to get up to 100. You know, and we had that possibility, we could mesh this all together. And, you know, they wanted to make it an alternative where they just run the fastest straight-up mile. You know, they're going to run it up Snow Rodeo or Devil's Club or something, just basically the fat person up the hill. It's a, you know, and we had that possibility. So, and that ties it not only to running, we can do biking or rent any race. We can do all kinds of things, and we're trying to go after that type of thing, make Revelstoke a destination for the adventure. You know, we're looking for an adventure challenge. Part of that trail system around Williamson's Lake might tie in as well, because then it opens the door for a main triathlon. I mean, you start throwing some swimming in there, trail, throwing a bike race, and all this stuff. And it's whatever the imagination allows. You can that can be pieced together. Okay, and some of the other stuff. I mean, operationally, we're trying to create a new patrol center so we alleviate the traffic from. You can see here they're dragged right across the plaza in front of all their guests. It just doesn't bode well for maybe a novice skier considering going skiing. So so we're trying to address that, and then we're also and also facilitating where the ambulances might be placed and all this stuff. But this is an ongoing issue. We're also upgrading the Gone. I mean, 7 years now. The Gone with cabins are all a bit scratched up, but we're it's a $50,000-$60,000 touch to improve that. But it's our image, and we're committed to that, and that happens this September. So, and then there's a bunch of other miscellaneous type of things that we're working on, but you know, I don't want to drag you too much into it. But what I wanted to finish up with was maybe a bit of a direction forward. You know, ultimately, whether I'm in the game of selling real estate. I mean, the ski hill operates. It does okay, but it would never. You know, if you had to put $150, $200 million into it, and for the profit level, it wouldn't be a wise move. It's only a wise move if you had some real estate sales. And real estate hasn't worked for the resort in 5 years. There hasn't been a property. Well, there have been some transactions, but the majority, there hasn't been a big move on the real estate front for a long time. And I don't know how, you know, or what the grand thinking is on this thing, but I look at it, the only way real estate in that level is going to sell is it's sold on lifestyle. And we're selling not only skiing, but it's the Revelstoke community, it's the activities that are here, everything that sells Revelstoke. And so my mission is to celebrate that. I keep plugging in all these new activities, these new adventures. I'll keep working on the skiing because that's my direct influence that I can do something on. But I think it's a community effort. I think lifestyle can't just come from the resort's a part of it, but it's the bike trails, it's the McPherson, it's the cross country trails, it's the museums, the braille. We all tie time together to make this work, and that's sort of a bit of a mantra or a bit of a mission I'm trying to send my, corporately, and I'm also trying to sell it community-wise as well. So I think that's sort of where I see myself, and where I see I have to go and reach anything that I have a bit of a vision for what this thing can be, and I bought in. I believe in Revelstoke, and I think it's an incredible mountain. I think the snowfall is what sells it. The mountain, the community, all those sort of things make this place special. And I think, but good to be part of it, and hopefully we can pull these things together and make it work. So there you go. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Questions?
Oh, sorry.
Councilors, please.
Chris.
Not that I have any particular interest in this, but some of the comments that I've heard in the past is about family friendliness, and everybody likes it as a hardcore sort of hill. I mean, it's got a great reputation that way. Just the family friendliness, we talked about attracting people that are the Silver Star market and that sort of thing, and I mean, that's what I've heard in the past is that, that's really family friendly, and this is not quite so much. So how are we making out that way? Or is that not part of the vision? And also your comment about making it a whole community thing, I think fits into that family thing as well, being part of that. So any comment about that?
I think the real issue is we're still young. We're 7 years old, and we're working on trying to improve the green horn, some of the easier runs on the hill. We've got work to do. You know, I can't fight what the hill gives you on overlays, right? We were a big mountain, and the fall, what really works for us is the fall line scheme that's there. So there are challenges. We're working on our grooming. We bought a new groomer that allows us to maybe upgrade it, keep the grooming a bit better than it has been in the past. You know, if we get into the terrain park, we'll add another groomer. The terrain park and the groomer are connected at the hips. We don't get another groomer. The terrain park is not going to be an option. So, but if we do get a terrain park and another groomer, the groomer's excess time allows us to go into grooming. So we're adding on to our grooming side, which is vital. Right? And we need to add that for families. We need it for the blue skiers. We need grooming a big part. And so family friendly is always on our concern. But there's so much you just can't solve all the battles at once, or resolve all the battles at once.
Thanks. Councilor Bender?
Thank you, Your Worship. Can you comment on the proposed jump on air service for Revelstoke?
Yeah. Getting people here is the biggest hurdle we have to overcome. I mean, the airport itself there's some proposals and some ideas about extending it, and that would be the biggest step forward. I mean, jump on air is great if it can work. Jean-Marc and the group were proponents, and they're trying to draw support, trying to bring some financing to make it work. I don't know if we can support. There's so many things that we're drawn into that we can't support it financially. It'd be great to see it. And if he has some success, then I think he's looking at crowdsourced funding. Is that his intent on jump on? Yeah. I mean, we would love to get people any way they can get here, the better. The highway's a big problem. It's been, and we've been a big driver to make widen the highway, double it where we can, and include that access on both sides. That's a big one. Those are the biggest things that will work for us. Jump on air, it's a small number compared to what makes us viable. So, but they do come, and they're affluent enough, and they want to stay. It could help, but it's not going to be the biggest one for us.
Councilor Curzon?
Thank you, Your Worship. Rob, you know that I'm pro-ski hill, and I agree with your communications, that we can work together. But my question is, like you've been talking about summer, adding trail and all that stuff, but you don't have a business plan for the next 5 years, because Mount Mackenzie is a big part of Revelstoke, summer tourism. If we can attract summer tourism in Mount Mackenzie, that's a big compliment for Revelstoke. So if we don't see the 5 years business plan, what are we going next 5 years for the summer business? We don't know where we're going.
I think the 5-year plan, it goes beyond that. There's the updates that are required by the federal provincial government. They've required the master agreement, master development plan that was required by the provincial, who were granted the tenure there. We're updating, formulating a 5-year plan. I mean, you're right. We're trying to understand what's the sort of the problem with Northlands is that they're a hotelier. They're fully, that's their game. So they built their finances on the restaurant side, supported the hotel, all this. Now we're in the resort game, and what does that mean to them? I mean, they have to develop the land, they have to do all this stuff, and then develop a recreational plan to draw people. And I don't think that was in their that's outside their wheelhouse, I guess, if you're a baseball player. But it's fully new to them, and so now we're at the time, they don't, I guess they don't realize how extensive this is. We need to figure out a summer activity, we need to figure out what to do in the shoulder season, and we still have to celebrate the winter. So meshing all those together is a challenge, and I think they're getting a handle on it, and they're starting to starting to believe it, that it needs to come together. You touched on a very central part of what's going on here, that we just have to get this plan in place, and I have to sell it to my higher level people that this has got to be put on the table. We've got to develop a way forward, a plan to go forward. And I think that we're getting there, we just haven't gotten there yet.
Because the recreation go hand in hand with hotel.
Oh, yes,
and dining.
yeah, you pressed a sore spot for.
Councilor Mason.
Rob, just under your leadership with the grading on the south side, does that improve the stats for search and rescue volunteers or partners?
Yeah. One of the things that happened last year is the fire service, the wildfire group cut a trail into Montana Creek. You know, as we've been running the resort over the last number of years, we've been losing people down the drain. Probably 18 was the year before. Last year we had one person go down the drain. So it was a big success. You know, the great part about that is that it eventually where that trail ends up is at the bottom of lift 18. So if we do go forward and develop a lift in 4 or 5 years out, it's already the pathways in place. So it's all a good strategy too. Yeah, and you know, we're still thinking about growing. I mean, we're the tallest or the most vertical in North America. We've got we're competing for the most vertical for a single most area for a single resort. We have that potential. If we start going off into the Elephant's Trunk, which is a bump that sort of looks over the. If you look up from the highway, it's basically one line. It's a bump. There's 2 rock patches and a little knoll in the middle. It runs all the way down to from the top of the gauntlet to the base area above the little silhouette there, and you throw that into it, and then you throw in connect some runs on the south side, and we become the single largest resort. I mean, Whistler's 8,000, we'd probably be in the 5,000 total square, and that makes us a single largest resort, as long as in addition to the tallest as well. So and those are marketing stories that would be a marketer's heyday.
Thank you, Rob.
All right.
Thank you for 65 great days. Thank you for having time that I could teach my granddaughter to ski up there. It is family oriented, and I think a lot of the hype that started off with the ski hill is actually blowing away as people start to discover that it is 50% blue and green. There's more intermediate terrain than most people realize, and the hype around the extreme skiing is fading as people come up here, particularly those. And on behalf of the community, I'd like to express appreciation for the free passes that were offered to those over 70 last year. There was a program that they had for those over 70, you could get a free season's pass. Unfortunately, the price has gone up to $25 this year, but I still haven't heard of anybody, including Councillor Scarcella, who's going to balk at $25. Particularly when they get a free breakfast with the deal. The breakfast is excellent, and I have to admit that wing night has been a special favorite of mine for the last 4 weeks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Having said that, let's move back to our agenda. And business arrival for minutes, page 1. Page 2. 3. 4. Page 5. Hearing nothing, we'll move on to correspondence. Item A is a property tax notice request for late penalty removal. Mr. Bender, is that yours?
It would be, yes. And that would be that Mr. Hunter's request for a 2014 tax review with the Ministry of Community, Sport and Culture be denied.
Motion?
And, yeah, that would be the motion.
Okay, is there a seconder? Austin? Background?
The background is Mr. Hunter sent us a letter. He says, I went to City Hall at the due date to ask how I could pay my taxes and still be able to be eligible for the homeowner's grant, not having a notice to sign the book. I was told I was a full day late and would be penalized 10% for my efforts. The taxes were paid in cash on 07/07/14, less the penalty amount. For the reasons above, I would like to request that council review this letter. I'm reading handwriting here. Review this letter and notifies Ministry of Community, Sport and Culture that the penalty amount be deducted subject to section 315 of the Local Government Act.
Mr. Ingles, anything to add?
I don't think so, Your Worship. Mr. Hunter has explained this case very clearly here. We had a number of people come in after the due date and have been paid their penalty for late payment. The tax notice was sent to the address. It was on the tax roll, and the address that you given us. So there's not further that we could have done.
Thank you. Councilors? Councilor Bill?
Thank you, Your Worship. We discussed this at the Finance Committee this morning. Question to Mr. Ingles again is, we have a return address on our tax notices. Is there any indication that that notice actually came back to City Hall through the mail system?
Not to my knowledge.
Councilors, first of all?
Yeah, thank you, Worship. I see that cash receipt, that taxes were paid on the 3rd December. Paid out cash. I'm not sure if the 3rd was on Tuesday or Wednesday. Because the 1st of July, I'm not sure what the time was, but the taxes were paid on the 3rd in cash. Could you,
Mr. Ingles? He's looking at the cash receipt.
cash receipt?
Yes.
It said it was paid on the 3rd. The 3rd is still
Yes, it was paid a day late, Your Worship.
a day late.
Yeah, it was yours.
So the 3rd is, was Tuesday then?
That would have been the Wednesday, I believe.
Wednesday.
Okay.
Councilor Johnson?
Thank you, Your Worship. I've known Mr. Hunter for a long time, and I expect everybody at the council table knows Mr. Hunter. He's a good guy and all that sort of stuff, but unfortunately, there are all sorts of reasons that people end up paying their taxes late, they're out of town, and every year we get one, and if you start one, it's the floodgates open, and then you never know where to stop. So it's unfortunate, it's not nice to say no, but I don't think we have any option but to say no.
Councilors? Call the question then. All in favor? Opposed? Passes. Thank you. Next item is the letter regarding traffic congestion from Kelly Conn.
Yes, Your Worship, I'll bring forward the Kelly Conn's letter to Mayor and Council dated August 5th, 2014 regarding traffic issues be referred to staff.
Seconder?
I'll second that, Your Worship.
Councilor Dodd? Discussion? Question, all in favor? Opposed? None opposed, passes. And the next one is the Revelstoke Air Service.
Your Worship, I'll bring that forward, that the staff write a letter of support and principle for Revelstoke Air Services concept of promoting passenger air services to
Seconder? Councilor Discussion? Councilor Johnston?
I don't have any issue with supporting the concept of somebody trying to do air service to Revelstoke. I guess I do have a bit of a problem with any particular provider. I also have concerns about the crowdfunding thing, or whatever it's called, that Mr. Elliott mentioned in terms of financing. That I'm not comfortable with that, and I just don't think the city should be endorsing any particular business. We can endorse in general terms that we would back, obviously it's our concern and interest to get air service on a regular basis to Revelstoke, but I would stop about that point.
Councilor Newton?
Your Worship, I think staff have to be very careful in the wording of the letter. I agree with Councilor Johnson. Crowdsourcing is not legal in BC, it's in Alberta. And just wishing all his endeavors that not to support his business per se, but his concept.
Thanks, staff have acknowledged that as they draft the letter. In principle, in general terms, and noting the extensions that have been built onto the airport to provide that service, but not to any particular operator. Okay. Any further, councillors? The question is a letter of support in principle in general terms. All in favor? Opposed?
Well, I just want to be clear that the motion as written is not what we are endorsing. Is that correct?
So, Your Worship, perhaps, I think, just on that point, right now, the motion does read for Redstone Air Services concept, and if you don't want that part of the motion, it could be just a friendly motion to take out that and the letter of support in principle for promoting passenger air service in Redstone.
Yes. I'm fine with that.
Okay. Let's do it this way. I've called the question. I had a majority. I had one that didn't vote. So in essence, it's passed, but I will entertain a second motion and say that that motion should be in general terms.
I'll make that motion to
And
make
I'll
sure
second
it's
that.
in general terms.
So let the letter specify in general terms and not specify to procure. So we're clear on the amendment, right?
Is that?
It's not an amendment.
Procedurally, I asked Mr. Palmer, procedurally, we're okay with all of that stuff. It seems to me that maybe we should rescind that motion, make a new motion.
You can all form.
Just give me a moment to think, Your Worship. I think Councillor Johnson has a good suggestion there, rather than putting a motion to rescind and then redo it with the intent. If that's an option, or you can proceed with your direction there as well, either way.
I will defer to the parliamentarian in the crowd.
I'll gladly rescind my first motion.
Motion to be a motion.
Motion to
The
rescind.
motion is to rescind, Councillor Bender? Okay, so the motion is to rescind the first one. Question then, all in favor? Okay, the second motion, same wording, except it doesn't say Revelstoke Air Services, right?
Right.
Okay.
I'll read that out just for clarity, that the city write a letter of support in principle for promoting passenger air services in Revelstoke.
That could be to any carrier, any operation. So, Councillor Nixon, seconder is
Yes.
Councillor Bender. So we're clear on the amended motion, or the new motion? Question, all in favor? And that passes. Move on to old business, the zoning amendment bylaw number 2049, principal buildings.
Yes, Your Worship, I'll bring forward that zoning amendment bylaw number 2049 being a bylaw to limit principal dwellings be adopted this day.
Seconder, Councillor Johnson. Discussion? Further? Call the question, all in favor? Passes. Zoning amendment bylaw 2051, vacation rentals.
Yes, Your Worship, I'll bring forward the motion that zoning amendment bylaw number 2051 being a bylaw to include vacation rental in certain districts be adopted this day.
Seconder, Councillor Johnston. Any discussion, Councillor Scarcella?
Yeah, Your Worship, I'll be voting against it because give too much power to council and not enough say to the neighborhood.
Okay. Councillors, anything further? Councillor Johnston?
Just to be contrary, I think that this is a great step forward, and it's, there are probably going to be bumps along the way, and we can look at it a year now, but I think it's high time that we had something in place to do with it, and I think it's a really good start.
Councillor Wonder, Councillor Nixon?
I must concur with Councillor Johnson. It's something that we have clearly defined now.
Councillor Nixon?
Just for clarity for the community, we did talk last council about if there is concern from the neighborhood that we could have a second public hearing in the evening that people could attend.
I apologize, Councilor Nixon.
Well, just to repeat that if the neighborhood has significant concerns about a vacation home in their neighborhood, we could have a second public hearing if need be in the evening where people can attend the meeting if they're having trouble getting to the regular public hearing. So that the neighborhood can have them say.
Thanks, Your Worship. One of the two things I noticed 7 years ago when we took the resort under wing, one of them was be aware of escort services, which we've dealt with. The other one was vacation rentals, so they're long overdue to be dealt with. And I think it's a good opportunity, as Councilor Nixon said, to rejuvenate the community groups, who I put a lot of faith in. There were a lot of knowledgeable people in those groups, and not wanting many more committees, but I felt that the community groups were of a great benefit to us and to staff. Just a suggestion.
So before I call the vote, in listening to Mr. Elliott, one of the things that became apparent, and he made a similar presentation to the Rotary Club last week, was that the capacity within the accommodation providers in the community is starting to become an issue with their on-hill capacity in the resort. This addresses a part of that. There still is a need for more accommodations within the community. And the several hundred rooms that you may get out of vacation rentals are not going to alleviate the need for more capacity within the accommodations business opportunities within the community. Having said that, I'll call a question for you. Question, all in favor? Opposed? Councilor Scarcella opposed, and that passes. Thank you. And request update to council, a motion.
I would do that, Your Worship. I would move that the update to council regarding the 2014 goals and objectives be received for information.
Second, Councilor Nixon. And we're to address it, Councilor Nixon, this is
Yes,
your request.
this was my request for the goals and objectives to come back to council, and I appreciate the staff for digging into sustainability planning that was done with the community members, and glad that staff are using the sustainability planning tool for addressing the very high action plan items in your plan. And perhaps each committee can take this report back to their committees and see if we're missing any of the very high action items that have been accomplished or started, just so that we're getting more dialogue going on with the ICSP. And perhaps after that's done, Mr. Palmer, maybe we can have a workshop for council to see where we're having any gaps. And if we have gaps, how can we address them?
Anything further, Mr. Palmer?
I'm just send my compliments to the staff too. The team has been working really hard on focusing on council goals and with the ICSP, so my thanks to the staff members.
Any further, councilors?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I don't see any surprise in this goal objective. And one thing I noticed here that no need long-term borrowing in 2014 in the future. Where are we going to get the money for building roads if we don't stop spending? Where the money's going to come from, the long-term project?
So that's opening up a budget debate, but.
No,
the-
that's exactly it.
Yeah, I know what the line says is that there's no long-term
Yeah.
borrowing in 14, and that was a commitment that we made in budget 14 that we would not be borrowing for roads or other projects. And that's been accomplished. So you also note that there's been funds put into reserves. So the approach within the budget is to build reserves and build savings to address some of those long-term needs as they become necessary, and to avoid the need to borrow, but rather to spend on the reserves. And at one point, the city did have significant reserves, and they were depleted. And so for the last 6 years, we've had to borrow to accomplish those infrastructure needs that we've got.
Your worship, you don't count with the survey because we are one of the lowest city in the province on the survey.
We are now, yes.
Yeah, so don't count with the survey next couple, this 2-3 years.
Okay. I will also compliment staff, but I think that we should clarify that the last page dealing with the integrated community sustainability planning is a checklist for which all of the projects that the city council have addressed, in particular staff have addressed over the last year, have been targeted or as used as a checklist to ensure that the sustainability goals for the community have been addressed. So it's not simply a piece of guidance, but rather a checklist that's allowed them to ensure that the focus is there. Okay. Again, my compliments to staff. The motion is to receive. Question? All in favor? Opposed? Councilor Scarsaw is opposed. It passes. Thank you. Disaster training exercise. Verbal update. Staff Sergeant.
Thank you, Your Worship. Your Worship, Council and staff, I'd just like to take an opportunity to speak out about a recent training exercise that we conducted that caught a little bit of media attention and public attention on overall something we should really discuss, I guess. How do I start?
Click on from the beginning.
From the beginning. There we go. From the beginning. Here we go. So that's us. We held a training session. This one will work?
It should.
Okay. We held a training session. Nope. Pardon me for asking. Another one. We held a session July 23rd, 2014. It was a high-risk scenario, is what we call it. An opportunity to attend to a 911 call of an active shooter at the high school. We're not saying that this is the type of scenario we want to train for, but merely something that does come up in the media and does come up in reality. So our goal was to provide a hands-on training to the detachment members here. The purpose was to create an opportunity for them to do some team building, as well as get familiar with the new high school. A few of them hadn't been in the high school or hadn't actually had a reason to go beyond the front doors. So this is an opportunity to actually do some searching in it and actually respond to a call in a controlled setting. How did it proceed? Very, very well. Every one of those members from our detachment that was able to attend that day was provided an opportunity to respond to what felt like a real-life scenario, and they got a lot out of it as well. Team building. It was a great opportunity for the teams to win. The further opportunity was for us to get the Southeast District Emergency Response Team. A lot of people aren't familiar with ERT. It's our version of SWAT. That's on the media. You'll see in the States. We have ERT, Emergency Response Team. They had an opportunity to come here on one of their regular training days and actually speak and respond and teach, which was something we don't often get. A lot of our detachment members have never actually worked with ERT. Thankfully here, they've never actually worked with ERT. That's a great thing, but an opportunity for them to see how they deploy. I do want to offer the responsibility for creating this whole entire scenario was Sergeant Kim Hall. She organized this. It was an extensive project to over 6 months to get it set up. There's a lot of players that are involved, so it was a great opportunity for her to apply her skills and organize this. What it looked like? It looked like this, fairly straightforward. Police officers, and I'd like to credit Alex with the photo. He provided these, I got these off your site, so thank you very much. We didn't take any pictures. We were too busy looking out for bad guys. We did is we proposed a scenario. The scenario played out right from a 911 call at 8:30 a.m. We attended and we deployed our resources as we would with the training we had. We went in, we got critiqued, we came back out, we did it again. We came in, we got critiqued, we went back in. So we created a situation where our teams had learned each time how to do it better, So in this photo, you see 4 officers entering the door of the school. Out of interest, when we opened this door, out came a screaming actor. Next thing was the teachers in the windows screaming. I've got kids in here and they're shooting. And there were some acting dead bodies on the hallway. So reality was very high for us. And every one of us, when they said stop, went, oh yeah, it's a scenario. You'll note that we are carrying our firearms. Every one of us carried our own personal firearms. The barrels of those firearms were removed. We placed them with a special barrel that allowed only a simunition, so it was a paint pellet. So it was a very safe scenario, and There were no lives at risk. So as you can see, pictured from the outside, you're scanning, searching, and seeking out the threats in the school. Each officer in attendance was able to act out what our protocol would be for an active shooter. They had to determine an entry point, gather information from the 911 call, run to the entry point, enter the school, requires keys, requires codes in order to get to the school, and then determine where the shooter was coming from. This is an opportunity to pass by, like I say, the realistic situation and go to that threat. Training instructors were present. That's where we got the emergency response team present, and they were actually able to stop the scenarios and teach along the way. So we came in and did it, like I said, better and better each time. Since this time, the opportunity has come out from the community. It's led to changes in procedures. We've learned what we do right, what we do wrong. Communication, as usual, is one of those things we have to always improve upon, and we have to work on our communication skills with the city, with the different agencies we work with. And that has to be built into our plan so that we trust those who are to activate those interests. The emergency response team was able to play out beyond those 4 times we ran the scenario from start to end and play out for the rest of the day. So it was the opportunity for them to have their 3-hour response, and they stopped around 2:30 in the afternoon, how they would roll out an entire response to that. So we were actually able to watch this and learn from it. So. The benefit of having the RCMP in your community. Currently you pay for X number of members, and we really appreciate that. But we have the opportunity to offer you 65 police officers within 3 hours. And I can guarantee that if you're running a municipal police force, fully paid for your tax dollars, you would not have 65 police officers suddenly present. In this rollout within 3 hours on a training day, the only thing that went wrong was our tactical vehicle didn't show up. It had a breakdown. So we still adapted, we continued on, and we functioned at that same level without the tactical vehicle. I can tell you who did come. The emergency response team. We had an incident commander, negotiators, 4 of them, mental health practitioners and counselors, radio dispatchers and transcribers, dog handlers, radio technicians. Our Southeast District Commander was present to watch and assist. The E-Division Emergency Services Commanding Officer from Vancouver was also present. All of our detachment members possible, not those on shift, weren't able to attend. All our detachment support staff were involved, both public servants and municipal employees. The fire department assisted, BC Ambulance assisted, Queen Victoria Hospital was involved, as well as City of Revelstoke staff. So we rolled out a big training opportunity that really tasked a lot of people and gave an opportunity for us to learn and make sure we had things in place. Again, excellent team building opportunity. Everybody came out, slapping each other's backs, and knowing they could trust each other. In addition, we're improving that plan for the schools and other local infrastructure. A lot of businesses, banks now we're going to be interacting with because we know that we can improve the way we respond, and we're going to deploy that in the same exact manner. That's roughly some of the people that were in attendance. I'd like to really thank all the actors who were present. That made it more realistic and possible, as well as, again, Sergeant Hall for her efforts to make this happen, and especially the Revelstoke Secondary School and staff for supplying the facility. It allowed us to have a facility that we really would respond to if we had to, and a real life scenario rather than some made up one in a barn somewhere. So. Are there any questions?
Councilors? Thank you, Staff Sergeant, and please pass on our compliments and congratulations to all of your staff and your Sergeant Hall for a job well done. Very exciting and interesting proposal. I'm sure you got lots of good debriefing and lots of lessons learned.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Let's move on to D, then, Resort Municipality Initiative Funding Recommendation. This is the $100,000 for Smallville Bill.
Thank you, Mr. At the founding, we approved the amount of $100,000 to the Revelstoke Smallville project to assist technology purchase of new equipment.
I'll second that, Your Worship.
Councilor Rulock, seconds.
Thanks, Alan. If you read 4.3, that 5 years was approved at the provincial government, 2011, it's $100,000. And next page, if you look at 6.7, that costs about $300,000, and the snowmobile club will be paying the other $200,000. And there's a letter from the snowmobile club that they bring about $9 million to the community for winter sports. So, job well done, the snowmobile club.
Councilors? Call the question, all in favor? Opposed? Passes. Moving on, college.
Yes, Your Worship, I'll bring forward a motion that the president of Okanagan College be invited to attend a council meeting to provide an update of the college's future plans for the Revelstoke Center.
Second, Councilor Scarcella.
Just a little background, Your Worship, Okanagan College has not presented to council for a few years, and Okanagan College has offered adult academic and career prep program in Revelstoke for 7 years, and there's some cutbacks in that area, so it'd be nice to talk to them to see what their plans are.
Thank you.
And I know that the president is an avid fly fisherman.
Oh. So timing might be an issue. Councilor, do you have anything further? Question then? All in favor? Opposed? Passes. Economic Opportunity Fund request for bioenergy.
I would do that, Your Worship. I would move that the Columbia Shuswap Regional District Board be requested to allocate $15,000 from the Economic Opportunity Fund to hire a consultant to assist with the evaluation of proposals related to the development of a bioenergy facility in Revelstoke.
Second, Councilor Minsky. Discussion? I can add that there's been a significant amount of interest in the request for interest that has been published for the opportunities for bioenergy in Revelstoke, following the initial work that was done on this proposal. So the evaluations piece will be quite critical to the future of this project. Seeing no further comments, I'll call a question. All in favor? Passes. Thank you. Community Housing Society requests.
I would do that, Your Worship. I would move that the report written by the Director of Community Economic Development regarding the Revelstoke Community Housing Society be referred to in camera pursuant to section 90.1D of the Community Charter.
Councilors, a second? Mr. Johnson?
There's a small item D there, Your Worship, that should be part of the same motion, I believe.
Yeah, I would understand.
Okay.
Security department, okay. Councilors? Before I call the question, I'm going to vote against this, because I think that this is something that we can discuss in public at this time. I think that the staff are prepared, and the Housing Society and President can give advice. I'm not sure that we need to go in camera for this meeting. And I will defer to your judgment. Councilor Johnson?
Well, I guess, just look to section 91D, the security of the property of the municipality. That's what the reason for going in camera is, and I guess I would share the same concerns as Your Worship. I'm not really quite sure what don't know what the issue is until we start talking about it, so makes it a little difficult where we're going to go with this. I think Mr. Palmer maybe can give us some guidance.
Mr. Palmer?
So, Your Worship, that section under section D of 90.1 is an option for council when you're dealing with lands. So specifically, there's a request here for going fee simple in the report on the property. So it's a provision that council may discuss this in camera, but council is not obligated to take this in camera.
Councilors? Councilor Scarcella?
Thank you, Your Worship. And I will vote against also because look on 6.1, the city council has already agreed to enter in 60 years lease with the city of Revelstoke.
Councilor Bennett?
Thank you, Your Worship. So just for clarity, there is no particular private versus municipal negotiations going on that would influence a sale or a movement of that property. So that means it doesn't necessarily have to be in Canada. Is that correct?
Your worship, that is correct. Maybe I'll just provide some clarity of items that can go in camera. I think it's useful for a reminder for our staff council and for the community. There's very specific regulations under the community charter for taking information in camera. Some items must go in camera, so the council does not have an option on that. Other items may take it in camera, and some of those items, for example, are on goal setting, things like disposition of land, security of the land, so if there's questions, legal issues can definitely go in camera. There's some that very distinctly must go in camera when there's privacy issues and things like that. It is to allow council to have a freer discussion on those items and weigh out the implications regarding those. What we always do is give reason why we're going in cameras to have as much transparency as possible.
Councilor Goodall?
Thank you, Your Worship. This will have changed because the agenda has changed. There were 2 updates in our newest agenda to do with the Housing Society. I think there's some confusion on that. One of them is to do with the lease, which is here and ready for us to go ahead with. And the other one is a letter from the chair of the Housing Society. And I don't think this has anything to do with those 2, although it does talk about us processing a lease, which is done. So this perhaps should have been updated. So I think it's a little confusing. If it's to do with security of the property of the municipality only, I'm fine with it going in camera. The other items will be dealt with this afternoon here in the open council meeting. That's my understanding. Correct me if I'm wrong.
This motion gives council the opportunity to take the matter into in camera, and it would alleviate some of the other discussions that have gone on. There is nothing saying that this can't come up in camera again. But the discussion regarding whether it's a lease or a purchase and where the process sits, in my mind, should be public discussion at this point.
Correct.
In essence, to ensure that we're all on the same wavelength, rather than have council making an in-camera decision that may be construed in a different manner some of it. But each councillor is, you're obviously very open to your own interpretations and decisions.
Great.
Councillor Scarcella?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. This should be a public knowledge because land owned by the city, for the taxpayers, it should be open council meeting.
Councillor, are you ready for the question or further discussion? So the question then is to take this matter to in-camera. All in favor? Opposed? Unanimous opposition, so the matter will be in. That motion fails. We move then on to item F.
I would do that one, Your Worship, and that's a follow-up on.
Your worship,
Oh,
if
sorry.
I may, then it's my understanding that we'll be entertaining the recommendations under
Right.
E from the Economic Development Office.
Okay, so
That's A and B on your report.
the recommendations A and B. And good catch. So somebody from the Housing Society wish to make those motions?
I would, Your Worship. So this is to do with the society lease, am I correct?
Right.
I would move that the mayor and director of corporate administration be authorized.
No. You go back to item 9E,
Oh, okay.
his recommendations A
All right.
and B.
Okay, that the Revelstoke Community Housing Society is provided with the option of entering into a 60-year lease for the property on Oscar Street or obtaining fee simple ownership of the property, subject to council approving the lease agreement with the Revelstoke Community Housing Society. And B is that staff be authorized to apply to the homeowner protection office for an exemption from sections 14, 22, and 26 of the Homeowner Protection Act for purpose-built rental properties.
Your worship, if I may, I would recommend that these be entertained as separate motions, and two separate topics.
Two separate motions?
Okay.
The first one is A, provided with the option of entering into a lease.
Correct.
Okay, is there a second there for the first motion, Councilor Scarcella? Any
That
discussion?
stops it. Sorry, Your Worship, that stops at the word property, ownership of the property, period. That's the end of that.
Your worship, I
No.
believe that the intent is
Yes.
this whole item, including the subject clause.
Okay. Not seconded.
Seconded by Councilor Scarcella. Okay, so are we clear on what the motion is? Further discussion? All in favor? Passes, thank you.
And D, Your Worship, I move that staff be authorized to apply to the Homeowner Protection Office for an exemption from sections 14, 22, and 26 of the Homeowner Protection Act for purpose-built rental properties.
Any seconded? Councilor Scarcella? Discussion? Councilor Johnson?
And this would be in the event that the society opts for the lease option.
Correct. Councilor, anything further? Call the question. All in favor? Opposed? None opposed, passes. So that leads us to item F.
Hopefully.
Correct?
Yes. Can I do that now, Your Worship?
You can do it now, please.
Okay. I would move that the Mayor and Director of Corporate Administration be authorized to sign the lease agreement on behalf of the City of Revelstoke, subject to acceptable amendment by BC Housing and final decision on property ownership.
Second, Councilor Scarcella. So item two, the final decision would be a decision by the society as to which way they want to go. Correct?
Yes, that's correct, Your Worship. Cautionary note, the lease agreement is 45 pages in length. It took some time to draft it. Legal opinions were sought, and we're moving forward with it.
Mr. Palmer, anything further?
I think I'm good with that.
So the lease agreement then is very close?
Yes.
Yes, Your Worship, it's, we've been receiving information right up until today, getting it very, very close to being ready to be ratified. It's in the package, the amended package, council package today, so we're satisfied with where that's at today.
So in essence, it could happen fairly quickly once this motion is passed.
That's correct. Your Worship, with the subject on the ownership issue, we need to resolve that as well.
So the question is still with the society as to which way they want to go, but once they decide that, then they can move right with that.
That's correct.
And they're going to be cautious with timelines. The timeline of the lease versus the timeline of the simple ownership.
That's my understanding, yes.
Councilor Johnson?
Just, again, in terms of the closeness of how close we are to having this lease finalized, the motion says subject to acceptable amendment by BC Housing. That's what you're saying is
We,
90-some% there? Or?
yeah, Your Worship, it's probably over 99 plus. We received some additional information just a few hours ago on this from BC Housing, so it is pretty much there.
Okay.
Councilors?
It is a 60-year lease, I believe, Your Worship.
Yes.
Your Worship, Teresa may or may not have any additional information at this point.
Ms. LaRose?
Yeah, Your Worship, no, I do not. It's just almost there.
I must admit, I haven't read the full lease agreement, having just got it 2 hours ago. Okay, councilors?
Just a changing note, but soon the lease approve the working permit. What the half of the working permit is gonna be approved right away, soon the lease be approved.
The building
The
permit.
building permit.
Building permit. Let's talk about the building permit after we
Okay,
get this one, okay?
Okay.
So the question then is delegating approval for the lease. Question? All in favor? Opposed? Passes. So the question then is, the building permit comes along. Mr. Palmer, Mr. Thomas, Mr. Strachan, anything to add on the building permit?
I'll just make, Your Worship, I'll just make a sort of a broad statement. We still do not have a complete building permit application. Either the director can maybe give some additional information.
Mr. Thomas, Mr. Strachan?
Thank you, Your Worship. We're waiting for some amended drawings as well as the HPO issue has to be addressed. And some other documentation provided and for us to be able to issue the building permit. As soon as that information is provided, the rest of the review has been completed, so we're just waiting for that information to come from the professionals that are signing on for this version.
That's the architect and the engineer.
The architect, the engineer, as well as the professionals who are going to be doing the trade work. Some of the trades have not been identified.
So the identification of the trades may be fairly simple. Are there fairly significant pieces that are missing within that building permit application?
The most significant piece missing, it falls under provincial regulation that doesn't allow us to issue the building permit, is the HPO. We need that exemption letter in order to issue. The second more major piece would be the completed drawing package. The drawing package has been sent back to the applicant for updates and review both from the engineer as well as from the architecture.
So, two questions then. One is the timelines on getting the revised drawings back. And the second one would be the timelines on the HPO. So if the lease were to be signed at 4 o'clock, how long would it take to get the exemption to the HPO?
The exemption to the HPO has two parts to it. One is a requirement for a covenant to be registered on the title for the property. So we need to have a 219 covenant registered, which essentially establishes that the property will not be sold within that 10-year period without the owner being notified that there is no HPO in effect. Once that covenant is registered, that would be included in the letter sent to HPO requesting the exemption. The HPO processes it, then sends a letter back to the applicant, who is the property owner, receive that letter exempting the requirement for HPO, allowing us to issue the building permit. The process for developing the covenant would depend on how long it took with the lawyer. The second part with the HPO is normally several weeks for them to process the request and then send a letter back to them.
Okay, so what was the timeline on the drawings?
Timeline on the drawings is with the applicant, so as quickly as they can return them to us, we are ready and prepared to immediately review them, but we need the drawings to come back.
Councilor Johnson?
Just a question, is it not possible to issue the permit and go to a certain stage subject to getting the HPO exemption later on down the road and put the brakes on it if it doesn't come forth in a reasonable time?
Your Worship, there's a provincial regulation in effect that will not allow us to issue a building permit. Sorry, there's a provincial regulation in effect which does not allow the chief building official to issue a building permit without the issue of that.
Say, thanks.
Mr. Charles?
Your Worship, that's whether the HPO is, the exemption is applied for or the HPO is actually paid. There's still that requirement. It's not the fact that the HPO is being exempted that's the problem. It has to be addressed through HPO one way or another before a building permit can be issued.
I have to express my frustration and disappointment that we're not moving faster. But short of digging a hole by myself, it's not going to get there. Anyway, thank you very much.
You couldn't dig a hole, Your Worship, you need a permit for that.
Yeah.
Your Worship, I still didn't get any answer about when the specific date, like roughly would be, like 2 days, 3 days, 4 days. Because it's very important that we know, because construction is supposed to start April, May, June, July, now it's August. It's getting late. So we should know when this is going to happen, because the construction company wants to know. And if this month to go by, the expenses go way up. And we haven't got the money to do that.
Hence my frustration.
Yes. But we should know, like, when this permits, building permits will be issued.
Councilor Johnson?
Thank you, Your Worship. Unless I'm wrong, from what I've heard Mr. Stockton say, and pretty much out of our hands, that we're talking about dealing with the HPO, it's not a matter of days, but rather a matter of weeks, even if everybody does everything exactly when they're supposed to do it. Is that what I heard?
Your Worship, I can affirm that that is correct. And also, we also do not have a complete building application, building permit application yet, so that information still needs to be received.
So my frustrations, Councilor Scarcella, are the fact that we've entered into, or society has entered into a project, and there has not been a critical path timeline established that sets specific dates and understanding of the workload and the tasks that were assigned to each one of those components going forward. And most projects would have a critical path with firm timelines and deadlines for the submission and retrieval of it. And this thing seems to just drag on without having an understanding of what those timelines are. And I'm not hearing that here either, because there's things that have to happen, steps that have to occur before you can issue the next permits, or we're waiting for somebody else, or somebody's not answering the phone and whatever going on. And somehow along, there's, in most of these projects, there has to be a very rigid timeline with very specific goals and accountabilities that come into it. And that seems to be missing. Anyway, unless there's anything further, we'll move on to the next, which is a letter from the Housing Society, which I suspect we just received for information.
I would make that motion, Your Worship.
To receive.
Mr. McGee, Chair of the Revelstoke Community Housing Society, letter be received for information purposes.
Second. Discussion. All in favor? Opposed?
Worship,
You're
let's go-
opposed?
No, let's go back on Community Housing Society letter. On the end of the first page, what Councilor Johnson said, he had that on speed up the approval building permit to start, give us a building permit, the House Society, and we can do that after. How did other people building affordable house in other city? I'm sure that it takes 6 months to get approval, all this approval. I'm not going to figure to the city or the House Society or DC Housing. I'm not going to figures. But I'm sure that other community doesn't take that 6 months to get approval for building permit and lease. They've been building house, affordable housing for years and years, and that's our first one. And was our first, Revelstoke was the #1 priority on the list for affordable housing. And this project stopped. So how the community feel about it? Takes 6 years, we got approval, we didn't get approval, but we knew that in February we want to get this money. So we started the process in February. Now it's August, and we still haven't got nothing, like you said. So I'm not sure like I said, I'm not gonna point fingers, but I don't feel good about it. And I'm sure that people talk to the street, we don't feel good about it. It's 12 family or people that are expected to get in October, November, to those affordable house. We might lose them, move out of town, like senior or people that can't afford rent.
Well, I concur with you, Councilor Scarcella, because we did build 28 units of affordable housing 3 years ago. Bigby and Marshy, Bigby and Moberly, and the two of our own. But at the same time, it worked. And I'm very frustrated with the fact that this one just doesn't seem to go, for whatever reasons. And there's a whole host of reasons that may become apparent. I do not want to start tossing fingers or anything else around, and that's not where I'm going with this at all. But we do have to ensure, and staff have been given that priority, and they have been putting this as their highest priority to get this thing rolling. It just, for whatever reasons, is not flowing.
We have heard time and time again over the years that affordable housing is difficult and time-consuming to build. I'm not sure exactly why. We have heard that from people who have attended. What I would like to hear is just, is there anybody in the room who can tell us why? Or is this the average amount of time it takes? What do other communities do, as Councillor Scarcella has alluded to?
Okay, so, Councilor Johnston.
Thank you, Your Worship. You talked about us building these other units, and really it wasn't a housing society that was building those units, it was BC Housing that was building those units. Councillor Scarcella said they've been building units in Kamloops, for example. I don't know if you mentioned Kamloops, but over and over and over again. I can tell you, the first time I did a major construction job building a house, I made lots of things that I wouldn't do the second time around, and it took a lot longer than it should have taken. And for my part on the Housing Society, if I could rewind the clock and go back and do things a little bit differently, I would probably go back and do them a little bit differently and pay more attention perhaps to some of the people we were dealing with and all that sort of thing. I think it's something that can be expected of any sort of thing that's getting off the ground, and there's nobody to blame. It's just, that's the way things sort of go, and we're all human, and things take longer than you expect them to take. Nobody's particularly at fault, but I bet everybody, if we could go back 6 months or a year, would go at it a little bit differently. So I think that's the explanation for what it is. In Kamloops, if they've done their 21st one, that's because they've done 20 of them before, in fact, and they know all the ins and outs and ups and downs and all the little bumps that they might expect on the road. And I didn't anyway expect all those bumps. So.
Okay, so the motion was to receive. I called the question. I had 4 votes in favor. Councilor Scarcella, you didn't vote in favor or opposed to receiving the letter?
No, yes.
You're against it?
No, I'm receiving that, yes.
Just to receive the letter?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's unanimous. We receive the letter, it passes. And we'll move on to BC Transit. Councilor Scarcella? Transit?
Okay. We have the 1913-14 annual performance summary from BC Transit be received as information.
Okay, seconded. Mr. Nixon?
Your Worship, we've been discussing this, and we need we wrote a thing about patching, a little bit the transit about Saturdays and other hours, and then we decided to wait with the new council to get their feet there and see what they want to do in 2015, because we got lots of time. contract, I think, in February. Yeah, so they got signed in council.
Okay, so the motion is to receive the
Yeah.
report.
Yeah.
Councilor Mason.
It is distressing to see the cost for ridership going up over the last year.
Yeah.
Distressing.
It's a challenge to swallow those costs.
So it needs to be a top priority in the new council to address.
Councilor Johnson?
Echoing Councilor Nixon's comments, to see that the cost of ridership is up 20% approximately per ride is distressing, to say the least. And sometimes, in order to have public transit, you just have to pay a whole lot per ride, but it seems to me that there's got to be something that can be done in terms of the model of how this service is delivered that can make that work a little bit better. So hopefully the new councillor, whoever it is, that is something that can be addressed. It's a lot of money going for, I'm not sure how much service.
For very few rides.
Just, Mr. Palmer, Mr. Mason isn't here today, but could you follow up with Mr. Mason to see if the local transit company has provided Mr. Mason with the information he was asking for documentation of when the ridership was busier and when it was less busy? He was looking for those statistics from the transit company. Stats, thank you.
Your worship, yes, we will continue to follow up on that. Last time I talked to Mr. Mason about that, he still hadn't received the information. However, we are continuing to plan on having BC Transit come to address council on bigger issues.
Okay, so the motion is to receive. Call the question. All in favor? Opposed?
I'm opposed to worship.
Councilor Rhodes opposed. It passes. Enhancement Committee recommendations.
Yes, your worship, I'll bring this forward in 3 separate motions. First one is that the proposed location of the Moberly sculpture at the Wellstoke Railway Museum be approved.
Seconder, Councilor Johnston. Discussion. All in favor? Opposed? Passes. Councilor Mayor, you opposed or?
No, I'm sorry.
The second one, your worship, is that staff be authorized to paint the welcome sign at the CP underpass patina green to make it more visible and consistent with the color of the courthouse roof.
Seconder, Johnston. Discussion. Question. All in favor? Passes.
And the third one is that staff be directed to write to CP Rail and thank them for the work that has been done to enhance their landscaping at the CP yard along Victoria Road.
Seconder. Councilor Grandin.
Sure.
Discussion. All in favor? Passes. Great. Item J is signed by law.
Yes, your worship, the sign bylaw, staff be directed to proceed with a new sign bylaw, number 2054, and to repeal sign bylaw number 1864, and that the proposed new sign bylaw number 2054 be referred to the Advisory Planning Commission, APC, and the Enhancement Committee for their review and comment.
Seconder, please. Councilor Scarcella. Mr. Strachan, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. As indicated, we've been reviewing signs since I arrived about 6 months ago here in Revelstoke. There was a fairly hot button issue for a long time in the community. Many businesses and other uses in the community have signs, and signs are an ongoing problem in most communities. Experience with them is signs and parking are usually the strongest opinion that people have on business development in communities. So signs take many different formats, a couple of pencil type signs where you have a large sign that's attracting people that are in a motor vehicle. Then you have signs that are more facial oriented signs where you're trying to attract people that are more the pedestrian. This one in particular is doing both of those things at the same time.
Signs can have all different kinds of formats on the structure and all kinds of different character to them. Critical portion of a sign bylaw is to balance between the regulation that's going to allow for the community's, let's say, interests to be protected, however, still allowing for the businesses to be creative and reflect what they do in their business adequately. So allowing for enough flexibility in the bylaw for that creative energy that businesses have to carry through with their signage, which is an important component of how they get their message out to the community around them. So signs can have many different formats, many different shapes, many different sizes, and they are as unique as each business is. So when you begin to regulate them, there's a cautionary portion of regulation. You're not taking away that creative ability for business owners to have their business showcase, but still at the same time protecting the beauty that Revelstoke is, and all of the natural beauty that's around it is not taken away by signage. So with that in mind, I very carefully began the process of reviewing the sign bylaw with our staff and looking at how we could create something that's maybe a little bit easier to read, a little bit more user-friendly, have a little more consistency on how signs are addressed, and provide some regulatory configurations that would assist us in controlling signage, but at the same time not take away that opportunity for businesses to showcase themselves. So what we've developed is a draft sign bylaw. The sign bylaw itself is strongly regulatory based on the original sign bylaw. The sign bylaw there's a lot of work that was put into it at some point in the past, and it is actually a fairly sound bylaw. It has a lot of components that were very forward-thinking, and a lot of components that included regulations that many communities are now trying to fight back to. They lost control of it sometime in the past, and they're fighting back to it. Fortunately, Revelstoke already has a lot of those regulations in place that are quite strongly controlling signage, in particular third-party signage, which other communities are facing a big battle with now. So some of the changes that were made in relation to the definitions for different components, as well as how the regulations are applied. The strongest change is with the awning signs to actually provide some parameters on percentage of awning, for example, and to allow for more than one awning sign per property or per business, to allow it based on the length of frontage. So if you have a long frontage awning, you can have more signage than you can if you have a short awning. That more reflects what's actually been developed in the community. For example, if you look at the Revelstoke Mountain Resort business frontage, they have a number of awnings that go across their frontage there. Each one of those has their own sign on it. So this new bylaw would allow for that signage to exist. So those types of regulations reflect a lot of what's been developed already in the community, and would further reduce the amount of signage that you would see. For example, on a highway corridor, there's some regulations in the bylaw that allow for very, very tall signs, which, seeing what's been developed along the corridor, and you see it with just even the chevron sign that we saw at the beginning. Those signs are about as tall as I feel is probably necessary for the distance you can view signs. Going any taller than that doesn't appear to provide that much more of a benefit on that corridor due to the bridge as well as the slope coming up from the hill on the other side and the great vegetation that we have in and around the community. Very, very tall signs you see quite often on the highway interstates in the United States. And they can be 100 feet tall. They're enormous. You see them across the horizon before you see the sun. So I don't think that was something that was envisioned. We haven't seen it take place here. Those regulations were recommended for removal from the bylaw. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councilors, anything further? This is the initial step of the review of our signage.
Just Your Worship, kudos to Mr. Strachan. That was a big job to take that on, and this is a good start.
It is. Any questions? All in favor? Passes. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Strachan. Nice work. Okay, 1240 Powerhouse Road. 24 hours, we'll see this. Councilor Nixon?
Yes. Your Worship, the planner has made a recommendation that I'm going to take council straight to the CAO's comments that the city is currently addressing concerns related to said property, to storage materials and non-compliant operations on the remaining Lot A Plan EPP 10805, and it is recommended that council defer consideration of the subject zoning bylaw text amendment and rezoning applications until such time as the owner has completed the required works on the site to bring the property into compliance.
So that's a motion.
That's my motion.
I'll second that, Your Worship.
Any further discussion, councilors? Councilor Scarcella?
We know why, like, beside the wood, there is I understand that they start taking the wood away from there. So is anything else beside the wood?
Mr. Palmer?
Your Worship, I guess first of all, I just want to make it clear that this recommendation is based on the impacts of, on the current uses and where this proposed rezoning amendment will go. So I don't want to confuse the two issues as far as the enforcement issues. However, it is related. It's predominantly around the wood issue. I think there was a few other things, but I think it's the wood debris and the concerns around that. That would be best if that would be addressed first, in my opinion. And then council can have that sort of clarity about this confusing the issue. It's my understanding that Mr. Lang is making headway towards that. Yeah, we had a dialogue on the phone, I guess it was last week, I believe, and expect that that it'll be in conformance in the near future, and then we would bring this back at a future council meeting.
So I hear that staff talked to Mr. Lang too.
Yes, Mr. Lang and I have had dialogue directly, and also he's been working with Mr. Strachan as well on the application itself.
So he knows all about this?
Yes.
No.
Yes, I believe so.
So your Worship, we will bring it right back to council table once it's in compliance.
Your Worship, can we pass this with that, if it doesn't perform, it has to perform that before this application be there. So what I'm saying that if we give him sensitive, that he'll clean up sooner, like if he's got to get the permit, if we approve the permit. And with that, with something that he's got to, the permit's valid with, but he's got to clean it with first.
I think I understand the question.
Yeah.
So your Worship, the recommendation does have a condition, I believe.
Yeah.
It's conditional. So my concern is that there won't be a balance sort of looking at all the implications while that's still a hanging issue. And so with the motion that's currently on the table, it will need to come back to council, and council can have a robust discussion on the merits of the rezoning application.
Is that, Councilor Scarcella, does that answer your question?
Yes, and then, like, I like to go, like, condition, I like to go with a planning recommendation, a condition to remove the work.
Your Worship, often we bring forward these zonings with conditions, but they're conditions to do with colors or samples of materials to be used or
So, in fact, the condition clouds the issue. To bring back the original motion would be a debate on a zoning issue, which is clouded by this other thing that's going on. Okay, so the motion in front of us is to defer until such time and bring it back. The understanding is clearly that we'll come back once those conditions are met, right? Is that my understanding? Councilors, anything further? I'll call the question then. All in favor of the defer? So the majority have the decision. Thank you. Opposed? Okay, we'll move on to the next one, which is development variance permit for 555 Victoria Road, Alpine Village. I will recuse myself on this because I have a personal involvement with the manager of the mall. So can you...
I'll do that.
Please.
I'll read the motion first, Dean, and then... Okay.
You're the chair.
He asked me, I guess.
Yeah, I'm just gonna ask you. Your worship.
You need the exercise.
You're acting mayor.
Oh, okay.
The development variance permit application 555 Victoria Road, Alpine Village Shopping Center Limited, that the development variance permit application submitted for the property as outlined in your package be approved subject to the following condition, that the elevation plans are to be included with the development variance permit as Schedule A, and that the corporate officer be authorized to issue the development variance permit once the above notice of condition has been satisfied.
Seconder on that? Councillor Johnston? Mr. Strachan, you have the floor.
Thank you, Your Worship. As noted, we have a development variance permit for 555 Victoria Road. The shopping center includes a number of signage components. It has a number of businesses operating in that mall. What they're proposing to do is have multiple canopy signs. So we discussed briefly in the sign bylaw discussion in regards to how our current sign bylaw is set up. And a lot of these signs would become, once they're removed, would become illegal, and on the replacement would be in contravention of our sign bylaw. So the variance is to allow for more than one canopy sign per business. The second component is related to a series of cabinet signs, which are proposed for in front of the People's Drug Mart. These are a little different. There isn't a proposal to allow these types of signs in the new zone, or new sign bylaw, excuse me, nor is there provision in the old sign bylaw to allow for it. And what these cabinets would be posters or other things that could be changed and then relocked back into the glass cabinets. Staff have recommended support on this, and that these cabinets are actually on a blank wall. So it's a component that wouldn't be replacing windows or other things that give good street presentation to the sidewalks and roadways around. So they're not taking something away. However, you would note that these types of signs are not proposed to be included in the new sign bylaw, and that there's very few circumstances, this being one of them, where they would be supportive. Its proposal will come through with the development permit. Currently, the applicant is working on completing drawings for a facelift to the entire mall. Thank you, Richard.
Councillors, any questions? Councillor Johnston.
Just a question, you say that under the new bylaw, these things would not be permitted? These signs that are being proposed right now, is that right?
Your Worship, the canopy signs would be.
Yeah.
However, the changeable cabinet signs, which are a cabinet installed on the wall that has a glass door that you can open and put changeable text in, changeable posters to change it, put the new flyer in, and so forth. That isn't proposed to be permitted across the city.
So aren't we sort of starting out on the wrong foot?
I think the reason there is a development variance permit process is there is no perfect bylaw. You cannot write a perfect regulation that's going to account for every circumstance, which is why the provision of development variance permits is in place. So where an applicant can demonstrate the merit of their application in their particular circumstances that meet the objectives of the community at the same time as demonstrating why the bylaw doesn't work in this particular case is a part of the Local Government Act, and it's necessary that that process be there, because there is no perfect bylaw. You can't account for every circumstance in any community.
Thank you.
Councillor Bender.
Thank you, Your Worship, Acting Worship. So, with cabinet signs, there would be any sign or any poster that the owner of the shop wanted to put up. But they do that now anyway. And a lot of nonprofit organizations and community notices go up in windows of shops. The police don't take them because they block the viewing, but that's neither here nor there in this discussion. So wouldn't a cabinet for that kind of straighten that up a bit? Maybe get a little cleaner, a little more bordered?
Your Worship, there's two different sign components there. Actually, when it's in a window, it's actually covered differently. It's called a window sign. So the proposal is to allow for up to 20% of a window to be covered with window signage. Those being sometimes components of, you'll see a deck will actually apply to a portion of the window. The proposal is to reduce that down from 25% to 20%. The cabinet sign is something unique. I have seen other businesses utilize it. The most common one I've seen is actually to have their weekly flyer within those cabinets. They'll do the 3 cabinets with the 3 pages of the flyer that is in the newspaper or online. They've indicated in this particular case that it's going to be posters. This building has been constructed, so it has this blank wall on that side. There isn't the opportunity for windows or other components to be added to that facade. So it is somewhat a blank wall as it sits there.
Councillor Scarcella.
Thank you. The question is, we had a sign bylaw that was working well with the organization for 3 blocks from Defense Avenue. Are we changing that concept? Because like, it was working so well that when you put an application for permit, only take 3 days to approve it. That's how well it was working. Now we're changing everything and then take about 3 or 4 weeks to get an application. I mean, do we have a reasonable way that we can get the application approved in the same week, like we did before? In the 90s, maximum 1 week, the application was approved because the concept design, everybody understood what they could put and what they couldn't put on. But now, take weeks to get approval because nobody knows what the concept is. Just I'd like to know that because I would get a lot of feedback from the business.
Your Worship, I believe the question wasn't directly related to the variance at hand, but a question about sign permitting processing. We're averaging 3 to 5 days for issuance of a sign permit, sometimes 24 hours. Our building official can't get to it right away, and we have issued them the same day, so I would suggest that our service levels are at an acceptable level at this point in time, and have been for quite some time. Not anticipating any changes to that customer service focus with the new sign bylaw. Some ease will actually come in the new sign permit application form, which was attached in your package, which has actual signs that match what's in the bylaw. So it'll carry you through the bylaw. When you get to a fascia sign, it's defined in the bylaw, clearly bolded, and explains exactly what that can do for you.
So if we approve these cabinet signs, should we not change them, the name to council signs?
Council signs are exempt, actually, under the bylaw.
Okay, now, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Unanimous. Carried. Thank you. Get the mayor back. Please. Welcome back, Your Worship. I sense your frustration.
Yeah.
Where were we? Farrell Road. Nope. You gotta go again.
Yeah, thank you, and I kind of missed the closing of the wine bar, I had enough time. With that, AM Development Variance Permit 105 Victoria Road East.
I will recuse myself on that one, Your Worship.
Place to be
The motion is short, I know.
Your Worship, I will bring forward this motion that the development variance permit application submitted for the property as outlined in your packages be approved subject to the following condition. The sign plans and sign location areas are to be included with the development variance permit as Schedule A. The corporate officer be authorized to issue the development variance permit once the above noted condition has been satisfied.
Second. Mr. Bender?
Yep.
Discussion.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Just over.
The subject property is located at 105 Victoria Road East. And the development variance permit at hand is requesting to vary the sign bylaw to increase the allowable window signage from 25% to 37%. Figure 4 here shows a street view of the subject building and includes the proposed window sign areas on Orton Avenue and Victoria Road, as well as the initially proposed tree location. Figures 5 and 6 here show the proposed window signage for Victoria Road and Orton Avenue. And figures 7 through 9 show photos of the window sign areas up close. So that's the Victoria Road area, window sign area, and the Orton Avenue sign area, as well as on the door as well. Staff's original recommendation for approval of the application included the condition that a street tree be added to help mitigate the impacts of the proposed signage. We have since received feedback from engineering stating that the proposed tree may impact the safety of the intersection, which is at a difficult angle for visibility, and that the addition of a street tree is best left to future long-term improvements to the Victoria Road corridor. It is therefore recommended, as Councillor Nixon has stated, that the requested variance be approved with the condition that the sign plans and sign location areas are included with the development variance permit as Schedule A, and that the corporate officer be authorized to issue the development variance permit once this condition has been satisfied. If your worship or councillors have any questions, we're available to answer them.
Councilors?
Thank you, Ward. Just on the mountain ash, I know it's not, is mountain ash not a bear trap? I thought we discussed that several years ago.
I'm not sure.
I think we have a former bear-wear coordinator in the crowd, but it seemed to me it wasn't attractive. There's some controversy about the mountain ash on the Trans-Canada Highway between the highway and the Frontier Restaurant. Just to note, and leave it at that.
Okay.
Well,
Just editorial comment.
I was just gonna say, we're starting to burn off,
Yeah.
and it's getting late, so.
Yeah.
Anyway, any further questions on the proposal? Councilor Scarcella?
Just for information, at 25 to 37% for the frontage, window frontage. What about if this doesn't have a window frontage, like just black? It's the same bylaw?
Sorry, if they what?
If
If they just have a wall,
Wall.
you mean?
it's the same bylaw?
Then it's not a window sign,
No.
sign. It's then a fascia sign.
It's-
Yeah.
Councilors, ready for the question? All in favor? Passes.
Your worship, if I may,
Mr. Palmer.
I intended to do this, but just because of the issue around the tree, first of all, thank you to the councilors that brought that to our attention for review. That was very helpful. That prompted a bigger sort of question on the issues about on Victoria and the safety of that. So I would suggest, if you're willing to entertain a recommendation, that the Director of Engineering include Victoria's street traffic design that considers active transportation plan and traffic sight lines in the 2015 capital budget. Your Worship, if you don't want to entertain, it's fine, but it's just because that issue has come out of this, and it's complementary to other capital items that have been identified by council regarding Victoria Street.
So, do you need a motion on that?
What we do is, so,
I apologize for this, or I intended to have that dialogue, and it can be left, it's come out of this whole variance issue. And if this had been identified a little bit earlier, that would have been formed part of the recommendation.
does that have to be a motion as a specific project, or is it something the engineering staff would take on in any case?
They could.
So it's just something they would do in their normal operations? Or do you want a motion for it?
We have a slight preference for the motion that it puts a little bit more weight on that bigger.
Also move.
Seconder? So without discussion? All in favor? Passes, thank you. And let's let Councilor Johnson back in. Item N, this is an OCP amendment bylaw number 2039 and zoning amendment bylaw number 2040 to number 3 Farrell Road. And
I would do that, Your Worship. I would move that first, second, and third readings of the zoning amendment bylaw number 2040 be rescinded, and that the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure be so advised, and that the official community plan amendment bylaw number 2039 be adopted.
second, Councilor Wilson. Mr. Strachan, address this one first.
Thank you, Worship. The original OCP amendment and zoning bylaw amendment were related to a project that has since looking for a different location in the community. But as a result of the review of the OCP designation for that property, we was concerned with leaving it as multifamily residential type of OCP designation. And the OCP designation that was proposed seemed to be a more appropriate use due to its adjacency to the Railway Museum and adjacency to the railway itself. So when the applicant withdrew their application, they came forward from the administration with plan and support that the recommendation be to repeal the zoning portion only. So its zoning would remain in effect as it is today. However, changing the OCP designation and continuing with that portion of the bylaw, or that bylaw itself, to complete that process made a lot of sense from a community development perspective. Thank you, Worship.
Mr. Rose, I see the Big Bend development property instructed the city to do this.
Yes, Your Worship, we did.
Okay, so it's on their request.
Correct.
Councilors? All in question? All in favor? Opposed? Passes. Item O, Riverbend Mobile Home Park.
Yes, Your Worship, I'll make the motion that Mr. Raymond's request for waiving the development variance permit application be approved.
Second?
I'll second it, Your Worship.
Councilor Miller, discussion? Councilor Kingston?
I'm just going to ask Mr. Strachan to explain the history of this one.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. This came through and the author of the writer has done a series of mobile home sightings on his property. Previous interpretations of the zoning bylaw as well as the mobile home bylaw which we have in Revelstoke, which is quite unique. Part of the process for updating the zoning bylaw would be to incorporate those two together. The interpretation of that allowed for a setback that was lower than the bylaw includes. So reviewing the first application that's recently come in, This was identified as an issue requiring a variance. So this particular individual has cited several mobile homes in the past at one siting, and now needs to apply for a variance because of our updated interpretation of this portion of the bylaw. So as they've been citing these, and now there's a change in policy, they've requested that the variance fee be waived so that they can finish installing the mobile homes and apply for a variance without having to pay.
So to be consistent with the practice that they've gone on in the past.
The variance would allow them to legally continue with past practice.
Councilor, anything further? Call the question, all in favor? Passes, thank you. And item P, social development coordinator attendance at UDCM.
I could do that, Your Worship. The motion is that the social development coordinator attendance at the ECM be approved with cost allocated to the council contingency account.
Mr. Nixon, discussion?
Just congratulations to Ms. Perez. She's been invited to attend a workshop at ECM regarding poverty reduction strategy, and seems a good thing.
Councilors, question? All in favor? Opposed? Passes, thank you. Communications, I'm just going to run through these. Please stop me if you've got anything. The first one is the Economic Committee minutes of January the 1st. Building permit summary for June. I know that we're up significantly over last year. Fire Rescue Services month-end report for July. Is anything to add, Chief?
Very busy month. I note 9 full responses, 11 motor vehicle accidents, and 2 substantial structure fires.
Indeed, it was a busy month.
It was.
2 call-outs a week is... Rose Aquatic Center monthly reports. Notice the business is up there too. Animal control report for July. Columbia Basin Trust employment letter. Columbia Basin Trust annual report. I have a copy of that available at administration if you wish. Fire Chiefs Association recognition letter. Congratulations, Chief. Thank you. And Revelstoke Museum and Archives letter of appreciation of August the 4th. That has been passed on to the same. Same to the agenda. Questions to the press, David?
None, Your Worship. I'm good.
Thank you. Alex?
No, I think I'm good as well.
Motion moving camera pursuant to 90.1, et cetera, of the